A Fox 5 investigation 6 months in the making. Your tax dollars paying for one official's jet-setting lifestyle. Thanks for joining us on the 10. I'm Will Thomas, in for Brian.
And I'm Sean Yancey. A luxury car, $1 million home, and worldwide travel, all paid for by taxpayers. Fox 5's Tisha Thompson is in the Web Center now with what we've uncovered. Tisha?
Sean, last summer we received a tip from a Fox 5 viewer who told us to take a long, hard look when it comes to the University of the District of Columbia and its president. Specifically, take a look at his travel expenses. So we filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and what we have uncovered has city officials talking tonight. Egypt, London, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. First-class destinations for any seasoned traveler.
That's my money.
But we're not talking about a vacation.
Where's this money coming from?
We're talking about your taxpayer dollars in a Fox 5 investigation.
This requires an explanation.
We're going to take you on a journey.
We're here. We want to get answers about the travel expenses.
To find out where your money is really going. Alan Sessoms is the president of the University of the District of Columbia.
I would also like to introduce our UDC faculty.
It's a job that comes with a $295,000 salary, a Lincoln Navigator, and gas paid for by the university, and a $1.6 million house in Northwest, all expenses paid by UDC. But documents obtained by Fox 5 show Sessoms also spends tens of thousands of dollars on high-priced hotels and flights.
How much would you pay for a plane ticket to Boston?
These UDC students were quick to answer.
From here to Boston, definitely no more than $200. $350.
Like 400.
How about $1,400? That's how much Sessoms spent to fly to Boston, according to his credit card receipts. A relatively cheap trip, considering he spent $1,500, $1,700, $1,800 on flights for meetings in Los Angeles. And then there's this $2,200 receipt for a first-class ticket to a conference in San Antonio, where he also spent double the average rate for his hotel room.
That's a lot of money.
Cincere Lobau is a UDC freshman using student loans to pay her tuition.
We pay a lot of money to go to school, and you shouldn't waste money on flying to different places when we're out here trying to get our education.
The records also raise questions about possible spending on his family. This car rental receipt lists an additional charge for a child seat for a conference in San Diego. And UDC shelled out thousands for his entire family to fly to a conference in Jackson Hole, Wyoming over the 4th of July holiday. The most expensive trip? Egypt. Sessoms had plenty of room to stretch out when he flew to Cairo in one of these business class seat beds. The cost, $7,900 one way.
How many semesters worth of tuition is that for you?
That's like basically my whole 2 years.
After months of asking, the school provided a redacted itinerary. It says Sessoms averaged a few hours each day visiting UDC's sister university in Egypt. Then he went sightseeing, the pyramids, and shopping at the local bazaar.
I'm supposed to be paying for education. He wouldn't be getting away with it if there was better management.
And they may be right, because the paperwork UDC gave us is a mess. Most trips are missing receipts and raise questions like, how did Sessoms get back from Egypt? We know he made a stop in London and spent nearly $1,000 on hotels and transportation. But UDC says the documentation doesn't exist for why he was even in the UK or how much he spent to fly back to the United States.
We're not an ATM.
DC City Council member Mary Chase says the university's president is expected to travel.
Wow.
But she says she was dismayed at what we uncovered.
This is a public university, and so every dime that's spent is a dime paid for by the taxpayers or by the people who are paying tuition. there needs to be accountability.
Fox 5 tried for 6 months to get answers from UDC. The university spokesman, Alan Etter, finally told us Sessoms does not wish to conduct an interview on this matter, and our questions are still questions.
I'm looking for the boardroom.
So we went to a Board of Trustees meeting where Sessoms was scheduled to speak, but instead of the president, UDC spokesman Alan Etter came out to talk to us.
He's not in the building, no.
So he's not coming to a board meeting.
He will not be here.
Was he coming to the board meeting before we asked?
I would assume so. I talked with the secretary and she said that he just a few minutes ago said he won't be here.
We've been asking for 6 months. Your statement to us was our questions are questions. We need answers for the taxpayers.
And there are questions in my mind as well. I wish I could give you the answers to the questions. I don't have the answers to those questions.
At that moment, in walked Joseph Askew,
Mr. Askew, Tisha Thompson, Fox 5.
the chairman of UDC's Board of Trustees and Sessoms' boss.
Does it concern you that he won't answer questions about travel expenses?
If he is not responding directly to the press, then that's a decision that he has to make, and it's a decision that he probably believes is in the best interest of the institution.
But it's taxpayer dollars.
Exactly. Everything that we do, the lights that we have here are associated with taxpayer dollars. So like I said, we take every expense here at the university, including the president's travel, very, very, very importantly.
Will you be talking to him about this?
So we're in the process of getting the explanations associated with all this travel, and in the event it's deemed that it's appropriate business travel, the board will make a decision.
Now, there is a lot of paperwork that we went through, and buried within all that paperwork was something very interesting. This is a check for more than $6,000 that Sessoms wrote to the University of the District of Columbia, but we don't know why, because they don't explain what he's been doing on his trips. If you want to see the documentation and how we came to these conclusions, we've made a special timeline for you, and as you can see, you can go through all of his trips and all of his expenses, and when you click on a trip, this is when he went to La Jolla and Torrey Pines, we have shown you what documentation there is. If you want to see it yourself, you can click on the links. There's his trip to Jackson Hole. You can see how they paid for both the president of the university plus his wife and his kid. That's an example right there. You can see all this by going to our website, myfoxdc.com. Sean.
All right, so Tisha, we know that as a university president, he has to travel, but do we know why he's taking all of these trips?
UDC is not answering any questions. The one statement that we did get from Alan Etter goes like this: Sessoms travels frequently for purposes of engaging the academic community and promoting the university. But here is the thing. We're going to go back to the website here. There are all of these trips, right? Some of these trips, like this trip to Atlanta and this trip to Jackson Hole, those were on his itinerary of official trips that the university was able to give us. But this trip to Boston, there's another trip over here to the left in Oklahoma City, another trip here down to Memphis. None of those trips were on his official itinerary, and that's the kind of thing that was making students really angry when we talked to them, because they pointed out that tuition doubled when he was taking all of these trips.
Well, hopefully after your report, he will come forward and answer some of these questions for us. Tisha Thompson, great job. A Fox 5 investigation getting results. D.C.'s mayor and city council are demanding answers after watching what we uncovered. Thanks for joining us today at 5. I'm Sean Yancey.
And I'm Laura Evans. At issue, the president of the University of the District of Columbia and tens of thousands of dollars in questionable travel expenses. Tisha Thompson broke the story and is in the Web Center tonight with reaction from City Hall. Tisha?
Laura, the internet has been on fire about our investigation. This is a Twitter page. There are literally hundreds of postings talking about our investigation into very expensive trips by UDC's president. He did not want to answer our questions, but now he has no choice because he's got to answer to City Hall.
Alan Sessoms is the president of the University of the District of Columbia, D.C.'s only publicly funded university. A Fox 5 investigation found UDC paid $7,900 for him to fly to Egypt one way, $2,200 first class to San Antonio, and cannot explain dozens of other credit card charges for trips all around the country.
I did see the story last night, and I was very concerned, and frankly, it really looks irresponsible.
City Councilman Tommy Wells says he's ordering the city to take immediate action.
Part of my concern is not just the expenditure of dollars that may not have needed to be expended, but also their financial record keeping. And that's why I'll be sending a letter to the DC auditor asking for an audit.
City Councilman Michael Brown says he's very concerned about the travel during these hard economic times.
That the president may be kind of living this lavish lifestyle, certainly troubling, but I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say about it before we make any final judgment.
At his weekly news conference, Mayor Vincent Gray says he's asking for a report from the people who hired Sessoms.
I want to get a report from the Board of Trustees, first and foremost on the information that has been released in the last, I guess, hours.
City Council Chairman Kwame Brown says he's not going to wait and is demanding President Sessoms testify at a hearing about what Fox 5 uncovered.
Every day something comes up new from you guys. So, you know, what we have to do is we're following up on it. This is before our oversight hearings.
Chairman Brown sent this letter to President Sessoms less than 14 hours after he saw our story, saying he was troubled to see the report on Fox 5 concerning your travel expenditures and requested the very same documentation we used in our investigation. But Brown writes, the information has not been provided to me, which he finds disrespectful.
We've put forth some of the same questions that came out in the story, asked for answers. We will have Dr. Sessions here. We will be questioning about all of these issues.
Chairman Brown says he knows a thing or two about upsetting taxpayers after his own recent problems with driving high-priced city vehicles.
There are going to be taxpayers who say, well, why is Kwame Brown, after the trouble he's been through this week, going to be the guy in charge of looking at how Sessoms' money is being spent?
Yeah, well, I mean, one, the trucks are back. The trucks have been returned. Two, I have said that I would compensate for the time that I used the vehicles, which means there's no taxpayer dollars going to currently be spent moving further, and we're moving on. So, I mean, I think that's how you take responsibility, is you own up, you make sure it goes back, you know, you don't throw anyone under the bus, you take full responsibility.
And you expect that same forthrightness from Sessoms?
Well, yes, we expect the Board of Trustees to demand that.
Day 3 into our investigation into UDC and its president, Alan Sessoms. He still doesn't want to talk to us, but that didn't stop us from getting answers.
UDC's president, Alan Sessoms, didn't say much when Fox 5 tracked him down in UDC's garage, but what he did say has people talking about his Lincoln Navigator.
I paid for the car myself.
Did you see the story last night? Did you see our story last night? Do you have a reaction to it?
Sessoms says he paid for the car. Well, sort of. According to UDC spokesman Alan Etter, Sessoms' employment agreement provided in part that the university would meet the president's transportation needs by providing a car allowance of $60,000 for the purchase and maintenance of a vehicle. Dr. Sessoms used his one-time car allowance towards the purchase of the Navigator. In other words, UDC paid for the car. So what did Sessoms get for all of that money? Using a Freedom of Information Act request, Fox 5 obtained these receipts, which show Sessoms ordered a nearly $1,500 upgrade for 20-inch chrome-plated aluminum wheels and the $4,400 Elite package, which comes with charcoal interior and premium leather bucket seats. The university spokesman says the Navigator is the president's personal vehicle, and he uses it for business transportation as well as his personal use. But we want to know who was the man driving the Navigator when our Fox 5 cameras found it parked outside of UDC. Once we started rolling, he started moving, pulling into UDC's garage, where Sessoms jumped into the back seat.
When I paid for the car myself.
Did you see the story last night? Did you see our story last night? Do you have a reaction to it?
Now, just in the last half hour, UDC finally got back in touch with us and told us that man is a driver that UDC pays to drive Sessoms around. In this email statement, they say it is yet another perk of his contract. So we have posted it on our website, just like we've done so far with everything we found. You can find all the details about those aluminum wheels in the interior of that Lincoln Navigator. We also want to put that into context. We did call a bunch of different other universities in this area. The University of Maryland says its president has access to a state vehicle. It is a Toyota hybrid, and we looked it up. The MSRP of a brand new 2011 Toyota Prius is about $20,000 to $30,000 depending on your options. That's the Navigator is twice as much as that car. Sean.
Boy, I tell you what, Tisha, every day it's like an onion. You keep unraveling more and more layers
There's
of
a
this
lot
story.
of stuff.
Any more details coming out about those trips that you've been reporting?
Well, a lot of folks probably opened up the Washington Post today and saw that Alan Sessoms did an interview with the Post late last night. And in that interview, he says he needs to fly first class because he has leg problems. And he said all of his trips are receipted and all above board. Now, that being said, we want to once again take you to our website, and we want to remind folks that we have put every single trip and every single receipt that UDC gave us onto our website. It's playing around with us here for a second, but every time you click on something, you can see, for instance, he went to Oklahoma City. We found a receipt for $66. They still can't tell us what that receipt was for and why he was even there. So we have a lot of questions about that, and we want to see the documentation, particularly about a trip to Egypt. I'm going to take you back here again. When he went to Egypt, we found this ticket, $7,900. He says a university in Egypt paid for his entire trip, but this is his credit card receipt that's paid for by the UDC, and I'm sorry, by UDC, and we have documentation in my hand right here that shows that DC paid that credit card bill, and right there it says for his trip to Egypt.
The president of the University of the District of Columbia still hasn't shown us the paperwork backing up his claims. In just hours, he will face D.C. City Council about those pricey trips. Tonight, Tisha Thompson follows up her Fox 5 investigation.
UDC President Alan Sessoms is finally answering our questions after a Fox 5 investigation found dozens of unexplained credit card charges for trips all over the country. First-class tickets purchased last minute, including the $7,900 ticket to Egypt and England.
There is some question about, you say that you need to fly first class because of a medical condition, but Fox 5 noticed that there seemed to be purchases for a lot of these flights 3 days before you go, including the Egypt flight. It was purchased, it's on your credit card 3 days before you left for Egypt, which seems like the kind of trip you could have planned for. Why are we flying last minute?
I hadn't planned to go. The Egyptians insisted that I come because the president of the university hadn't been in place in 4 or 5 years. They insisted that I come, so I said okay, but the cost of a ticket wouldn't have varied much anyway.
The documentation that UDC gave us shows a trip from DC to Paris to Cairo, back to Paris to London. Yeah. We have the train tickets for London. We have the hotels for London. How did you get back? Do you have documentation to show that flight?
I got back on the airplane.
But the documentation you provided does not...
I did not provide you the my office was given the receipts. I don't know what happened to them. You're asking me what happens to paper when it goes into another process. I can't help you here. I don't know what happened to the paper, but I can assure you I got back on the airplane.
Our Fox 5 investigation also uncovered receipts showing UDC paid for not only Dr. Sessoms, but also his wife and his child to travel. Sessoms says he always reimburses the university for them.
Where are the checks for reimbursement, and where is the additional documentation, or do you have a problem with documentation?
I don't know if there's a problem with documentation. I give my receipts when I come back. I don't keep when I turn in my receipts, I turn them in the next day. Where they go from there, I can't say because I don't fill out the documentation. We are taking a look at that because it's not come up just in this, but in other areas where, you know, a lot of it's paper. You know, paper gets lost. So we're trying to do better in that.
You do say it's well receipted. Can you find documentation that you did not give Fox 5?
I didn't give you anything. You got it through it for you. I handed all the paper I have in. I don't have anything. All my original receipts have been turned in.
President Sessoms, shouldn't you know how much you're spending on travel because you are the president of this university?
I should know a lot of things about this university, and I know a lot of things. I don't know everything. Trips that were taken 1.5 years ago, I don't remember.
I have to tell you, it's coming off like a fairly cavalier attitude with money when it comes to travel.
It's not cavalier. I'm watching every penny. I'm trying to tell you how the process works. You're asking me whether I fill out every form and I check every expense before it's expended, and the answer is I do not.
So, Tisha, did he explain or say anything else about this medical condition that causes him to fly first class?
He did get into some more details. He says he has blood clots, and so he can't sit for long periods of time, has to recline his seat. And he said something interesting, Sean, and this is a quote. He says he is not willing to die for any job, and that's how he summed that up.
All right, Tisha Thompson doing a great job with this story. We know we have a lot more tomorrow. We'll be looking forward to those reports. Thank you.
You've had reports on TV asking you questions. You've had people ask you questions. And every time, there's not an answer. So today, we're going to sit here until we get an answer.
Right now at 5, fireworks at City Hall. UDC's president and his staff answering tough questions raised first in a Fox 5 investigation. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Laura Evans.
And I'm Sean Yancey down in the Fox 5 newsroom. We begin tonight with that spending scandal at UDC. We have learned that the University of the District of Columbia spent an estimated $1 million on travel expenses, not just for its president, but also for its staff, to places like Las Vegas, Hawaii, and St. Thomas. Our own Tisha Thompson broke this story. Tisha, what's the very latest information you found out today?
Well, I can tell you that this was originally supposed to be an oversight hearing about UDC spending in general, but it quickly became something else because President Sessom started out talking about all the positive things like increased federal spending, increased enrollment, in fact, record enrollment. But as soon as he finished his testimony, City Council launched into questions about his travel spending.
It's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
UDC President Alan Sessoms testified under oath he needs to fly first class because of a circulatory problem. But DC City Council member Yvette Alexander didn't buy it.
There is bulkhead seating in the coach area. There's business class. So there are other accommodations and exit rows.
Yes.
So, when I travel, I like some leg room too. So I understand there are amenities that you can take as well in economy class travel. So that is not a valid excuse for me.
DC City Council member Muriel Bowser wanted an explanation for why UDC spent nearly $8,000 flying President Sessoms to Egypt.
It may not have been the best price. It was a last-minute thing because the Egyptians insisted that I come.
Who insisted that you go?
My colleagues in Egypt.
How can they insist that you go? What happens if you didn't go?
It's not clear how well the program would have been doing. The problem is we are required to go to keep the program accredited twice a year, and the president is supposed to go once a year to confer the degrees and to ensure that the program in its evolution actually is benefiting the university.
The chairman of UDC's Board of Trustees testified that the board is ultimately responsible for approving the president's travel and announced the board has ordered an internal audit.
The internal auditor reports to two people, the president and the chair of the audit committee, always.
So the auditor reports to you?
And the chair of the audit committee.
And the chair of the audit committee?
Yes.
Where does that person sit at in the university? Where's their office?
Their office is in the administration building at the university.
Where exactly in the administration building?
A couple of doors.
Up there before. Where?
A couple of doors from in the executive suite. A couple of doors from my office. Next to the general counsel's office.
So, Mr. Askew, the internal audit has been done by someone that actually reports to the president.
Again, the internal audit is being conducted by someone that was hired by the president of the university. But I can tell you that we have good faith in her ability to conduct an independent audit.
But DC City Council Chairman Kwame Brown argued the city needed an independent auditor.
The president has called you up here, I guess, to throw you underneath the bus.
Especially after one UDC staffer after another couldn't explain why the university can't find the paperwork for an estimated $1 million in travel expenses for Sessoms and other employees.
It pains me to have to sit here and ask these questions because you haven't given us any responses. That is what the most painful part of this is. But it's our job to ask the questions, to get the information, and for someone to accept some sort of responsibility.
UDC's Board of Trustees did promise to have that internal audit finished by the end of this month. And Sean, they did mention that if they do find that there may have been inappropriate travel, they do expect to ask President Sessoms to pay back some of that money if they find that is necessary and if they find that something went wrong in that audit.
So at this point, it really is up to the board what happens to SESM, right?
Very much so. I mean, the board is ultimately responsible for hiring him, and they're ultimately responsible for his fate. That being said, the chairman said something very interesting today. He said that there are 7 voluntary members of the board. He himself is one of those members. But for 2 years, UDC has been waiting for the mayor to appoint 8 vacant seats. So he says they're overwhelmed.
A Fox 5 investigation right on the money. Tonight, we're getting an exclusive sneak peek at an internal audit ordered after Tisha Thompson exposed questionable spending by the president of a local university.
The University of the District of Columbia is paid for in part by D.C. taxpayers, and UDC ordered an internal audit after we started asking questions about why the president of the university, Alan Sessoms, was spending tens of thousands of dollars on luxury travel, including a lot of first-class tickets. In our original report, we found a lot of things just didn't seem to add up. For instance, it looked like receipts showed that UDC was paying for not only Sessoms to travel, but also his family. And there seemed to be multiple tickets, airline tickets, to the same place on the same dates. Why was that? Well, we're finally starting to get some answers because UDC's internal auditor presented her preliminary findings to the university's Board of Trustees, a volunteer board who hired the president and, by their own admission, should be approving his travel. This is what the auditor had to say.
The Office of the President did not submit the semi-annual travel budget and quarterly expense reports. There were also no written travel procedures at UDC.
The auditor also says the Board of Trustees has not approved the president's travel for at least a year. Some of the president's travel authorization forms were incomplete or incorrect. That is something we had reported on. We had also noticed a lack of original receipts. The auditor says she had the same problem. She also says the president's corporate American Express card was inappropriately used to pay for personal expenses like family travel. And she found the president's office booked multiple refundable airline tickets to the same location, and they never canceled the tickets that the president didn't use. Now, why is that important? Because remember, many of these tickets cost thousands of dollars to book in the first place because they were booked at the last minute and they were for first-class travel. Now, it's up to UDC's Board of Trustees to decide what to do with this audit. And we know that there's at least one group who's very interested in what they do. That is DC's City Council, because they are going to have an oversight hearing on Wednesday, and they say this audit will be on the agenda. Tisha Thompson, Fox 5 News.